Hello, and welcome back to Daily English Voices. I'm so glad you pressed play today, and I want to begin by saying thank you. Whether you are at home, out on a walk, driving to work, or simply taking a moment to yourself, your choice to spend this time here means a lot. Every time you join me, you're not only practicing your English, but also giving yourself new ideas that can strengthen your mindset and improve your daily life. That combination language and growth is powerful, and it's the reason this channel exists. Today's episode is about something many people live with but rarely notice. It doesn't shout, it doesn't look dangerous, and at first it can even appear helpful. But if you let it grow, it slowly drains your confidence, wastes your energy, and blocks your progress. That hidden problem is perfectionism, and I like to call it a silent growth killer. Now, what does that mean? Perfectionism is not simply wanting to do a good job. Doing things well is healthy. Effort, ambition, and excellence are good. But perfectionism goes beyond that. Perfectionism is when nothing you do feels good enough, no matter how much effort you put in. It's when you set standards so high that reaching them becomes almost impossible. It's the voice inside that says, "Don't start yet, you're not ready," or "Don't speak, you might make a mistake." At first, it looks like discipline, but really, it's fear wearing a mask. Think about something simple, like writing an email in English. For most people, it takes 5 or 10 minutes. You write your message, maybe check it once, and then send it. But for a perfectionist, that same task can take an hour. They reread every line, change words again and again, worry about every comma, and even after pressing send, they still feel uneasy, worried they missed something. Instead of saving time and energy, they create stress and frustration. Perfectionism shows up in many areas. In school, it's the student who never hands in an essay because they keep rewriting it. At work, it's the colleague who delays every project because it isn't ready yet. At home, it's the person who cleans the same spot over and over because it never looks perfect. And in personal dreams, it's the person who says, "I'll start when the timing is right, when I'm ready, when everything is perfect." But that perfect moment never arrives. When it comes to learning English, perfectionism can be especially harmful. I've met learners who know grammar, who know hundreds of words, who understand a lot when they listen, but when the time comes to speak, they freeze. Their thoughts are full of questions. What if I say it wrong? What if people laugh? What if my accent sounds strange? So instead of speaking, they stay silent. Silence feels safe, but in truth, silence is the real enemy. Because without practice, there is no progress. This is why I call perfectionism a silent growth killer. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout, "Stop learning." It whispers softly, "Wait until you're ready. Fix it one more time. Don't risk looking silly." And while you listen, days, weeks, and even years pass by. Opportunities disappear. Confidence fades. Growth slows to almost nothing. In this episode, we'll explore perfectionism in detail. We'll look at its roots, why it develops in so many of us, and how it quietly shows up in everyday actions. We'll talk about why it destroys growth, how to tell the difference between healthy standards and harmful perfectionism, and most importantly, what you can do to overcome it. I'll also share a story about one learner who discovered how letting go of perfection opened the door to faster growth and greater confidence. But before we go further, I want you to pause and reflect. Have you ever delayed doing something because you wanted it to be perfect first? Have you ever stayed silent in a class or conversation because you feared making a mistake? Have you ever held back from starting a dream because you didn't feel ready? If your answer is yes, you are not alone. In fact, perfectionism is one of the most common struggles people face. The good news is that it can be managed and it can be overcome. And today, we're going to learn how. Perfectionism does not suddenly appear one day. Nobody wakes up in the morning and decides, from now on, everything I do must be perfect. Instead, it grows slowly, shaped by experiences, expectations, and the voices we hear throughout our lives. To really understand how to free ourselves from perfectionism, we first need to look closely at where it comes from. Because once you understand its roots, you can begin to loosen its grip. One of the strongest roots of perfectionism is fear of mistakes. From a very young age, many of us are taught that mistakes are something bad. Think back to school. You write an answer on a test, and if it is wrong, the teacher marks it with a big red cross. That red mark feels like a scar on the paper, and even more painfully, like a scar on your sense of self worth. At home, maybe you spilled a drink or broke a dish, and the first response you heard was, "Why weren't you more careful?" Experiences like these, repeated again and again, plant a deep belief in our minds. Mistakes equal failure, and failure equals shame. Over time, we begin to avoid mistakes at all costs. Instead of seeing them as natural parts of learning, we see them as dangerous signals of weakness. That fear quietly follows us into adulthood and transforms into perfectionism. Another common source of perfectionism is fear of judgment. We humans are social beings. We care about what others think of us, sometimes more than we admit. Imagine you are in an English class and the teacher asks you a question. You know the answer, but suddenly your mind fills with doubts. What if I say it wrong? What if my grammar sounds silly? What if my classmates laugh? That fear of judgment can be so powerful that you decide to stay silent rather than take the risk. To the outside world, it looks like shyness, but in truth, it is perfectionism whispering, "Stay safe by saying nothing." The problem is that safe does not mean growing. Safe often means stuck. A third root is the desire for approval. Many of us grew up in families, schools, or communities where love, praise, or recognition only came when we achieved something excellent. Perhaps you remember being praised only when you earned the highest grades, or being celebrated only when you won first place. Slowly, you learned a dangerous lesson. I am valuable only when I am the best. As adults, that belief doesn't disappear. It follows us into workplaces and relationships. We feel we must always impress our boss, our teacher, our colleagues, even strangers, in order to deserve respect. That constant need for approval pushes us toward impossible standards. Every action feels like a performance. Every project feels like a test, and perfectionism becomes the only way we think we can earn love or recognition. Then there is the influence of today's world social media, advertising, entertainment. Every day we are flooded with images of so called perfect lives, perfect houses, perfect jobs, perfect bodies, perfect families. Even though deep down we know these images are filtered, staged, and edited, our minds still compare. We scroll through our phones and think, "Look at them. Everything is flawless. I must try to be like that too." Slowly, comparison creates an inner voice that says, "You are not enough unless you are perfect." With every scroll, perfectionism grows stronger. Schools and workplaces can also plant and water the seeds of perfectionism. Some schools focus only on rewarding the very top students. If you get a B instead of an A, you might feel like you've failed. Some workplaces punish even the smallest mistakes, creating a culture of fear rather than growth. employees quickly learn that it is safer to check something 10 times than to risk being wrong once. Over years, this constant pressure creates a habit of never feeling satisfied. You begin to believe that your worth depends entirely on being flawless. Family expectations add to the story. Parents often mean well, but sometimes their expectations send harmful messages. Maybe your parents wanted you always to win, to always be first, to always do everything right. Maybe they compared you with siblings or neighbors. Look at her, she studies better, or look at him, he's more successful. Even if the words were spoken with love, they can stay in your heart for years. As an adult, you may still hear that inner voice pushing you to meet invisible expectations, never allowing you to relax, never letting you feel enough. Finally, personality traits play a role. Some people are naturally careful, organized, and responsible. These qualities are valuable. But when mixed with fear, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough, those positive traits can easily turn into perfectionism. What starts as a healthy desire to do things well becomes an unhealthy demand to do them perfectly every single time. When you put all these elements together, fear of mistakes, fear of judgment, desire for approval, comparison with others, pressure from schools, workplaces, and families, it becomes clear why perfectionism is so common. It is not about ambition. It is not about passion for quality. At its core, perfectionism is about fear and pressure, fear of being wrong, fear of being rejected, fear of being less than others, and pressure from society, from family, from colleagues, and most of all, from ourselves. Now, here's something important to remember. None of these causes are your fault. You didn't choose them. They were planted in you by your environment, your culture, your upbringing, and your experiences. But while perfectionism is not your fault, overcoming it is your responsibility. Once you see where it comes from, you can begin to change how you respond to it. You cannot erase the past, but you can write a different story moving forward. So take a moment now to reflect on your own journey. Can you remember a time in school when a mistake made you feel ashamed? Can you remember worrying about what others might think if you got something wrong? Can you recall moments when you felt pressure to impress, to be perfect, to prove yourself? Those experiences may have planted seeds of perfectionism in you. Recognizing those roots is the first step toward freedom. And now that we have explored where perfectionism comes from, it's time to look at how it appears in daily life. Because perfectionism is not just a thought, it is a pattern of action. And once you recognize those actions, you will start to see how this silent force has been shaping your choices all along. Perfectionism is not just a thought in your head. It shows itself in the way you act, the choices you make, and even in the things you avoid. The difficult part is that many people don't notice it. They believe they are just being careful or hardworking, when in fact perfectionism is quietly shaping their lives. Once you begin to see its patterns, you realize how much it steals your time, your opportunities, and your peace of mind. Take the example of a student learning English. She understands grammar, knows many words, and can follow conversations. But when it's time to speak, she stays silent. Why? Because she wants every sentence to be perfect. In her mind, even one mistake will make her look foolish. On the outside, people might think she is shy, but the truth is that perfectionism has locked her voice away. Each class she spends silent is another class without practice, and without practice, progress is impossible. Or imagine someone at work who needs to write a simple report. They begin quickly, but soon doubt creeps in. They erase a sentence, rewrite it, erase it again. They spend hours polishing paragraphs, checking the same lines again and again. The deadline gets closer, stress builds, and instead of feeling proud, they feel exhausted. What started as a small task turns into a heavy burden, all because perfectionism demanded flawless results. Perfectionism also shows up in daily routines. Picture someone cleaning their kitchen. Most people clean until it looks fine and then move on. But a perfectionist sees tiny spots no one else notices. They scrub and polish long after the job should be finished. By the end, the kitchen is clean, but they feel no satisfaction, only tiredness. In this way, perfectionism even turns simple chores into sources of stress. Another common form is avoidance. Think about someone who wants to start a new project, writing a blog, opening a small shop, or simply practicing English with friends. They say, I'll start when I'm ready. I'll begin when I know everything I need. Deep down, what they mean is, I'll start when I can do it perfectly. But that day never arrives. Days turn into months, and the dream remains only a dream. This is one of the most dangerous effects of perfectionism. It convinces you to wait forever. So, why do I call perfectionism a silent growth killer? Because it does not attack you loudly. It whispers in your ear, wait a little longer, check one more time, don't risk it yet. While you listen, time passes, opportunities slip away, and confidence fades. Growth doesn't stop with a big crash. It slows down quietly until you hardly notice it's gone. Perfectionism kills growth in several ways. First, it causes delay. If you believe you must be flawless before you act, you may never begin at all. Second, it creates stress. Every task feels heavy because you treat it like an exam. Third, it makes you miss opportunities. Life rarely gives you perfect timing. Chances come and go, and if you wait too long, you lose them. And finally, it damages confidence. Because your standards are impossibly high, you never feel good enough, even when you succeed. Over time, that constant self criticism eats away at your belief in yourself. And perhaps the most painful effect is how perfectionism slows down learning. Think about language. The only way to learn is to try, make mistakes, and learn from them. But if you never allow yourself to try, you never make progress. You get stuck in silence, in hesitation, in endless preparation. And while you stand still, others who are less perfect keep moving forward. That is the hidden danger. Perfectionism convinces you that it is helping you do better, when in fact, it is quietly stealing your growth. Recognizing these patterns is the first step to breaking free. Once you see how perfectionism delays you, stresses you, and blocks opportunities, you can begin to choose a different path, one that values progress over perfection. Not all high standards are bad. In fact, aiming for quality, trying your best, and setting goals are wonderful habits. They push you to grow, to learn, and to feel proud of your effort. But there is an important difference between healthy high standards and harmful perfectionism. One builds you up, the other tears you down. Healthy high standards say, I want to do this well, and I accept that mistakes are part of the process. This attitude creates energy and courage. You start tasks even when you're not completely ready because you know practice will make you stronger. Each step, even with errors, brings growth. Perfectionism says, if I can't do this perfectly, I shouldn't do it at all. This attitude creates fear and hesitation. Instead of motivating you, it paralyzes you. You avoid action, you wait endlessly, and you criticize yourself for every tiny mistake. So, how do we move away from harmful perfectionism? Start by accepting mistakes as teachers. Remember that each error is proof that you tried. Then, begin small. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Say one sentence in English today. Write one short paragraph. Take one tiny step. Progress is built from many small steps. Next, focus on improvement, not perfection. Ask, am I better than yesterday? Not, am I flawless yet? Treat yourself kindly, the way you would encourage a friend. And finally, celebrate small wins. Even short practice sessions or imperfect efforts deserve recognition because they move you forward. To bring this to life, let me share Anna's story. Anna was a diligent student who studied English for months but rarely spoke. She waited for the day she would feel perfect, but that day never came. Her teacher finally told her, "Your problem isn't English, it's perfectionism. Perfect doesn't exist. You must speak, make mistakes, and learn." Anna decided to try. The next class, she answered a question. She made mistakes, but no one laughed. Her teacher praised her effort. From then on, she spoke more often, wrote short messages without checking them 20 times, and practiced daily. Within months, her confidence grew and her English improved faster than ever. Anna's journey shows that progress begins the moment you let go of perfection. By giving yourself permission to be imperfect, you unlock the door to growth, confidence, and joy. As we close this episode, take a moment to reflect. Where in your life is perfectionism holding you back? Is it in your studies, your work, or your personal dreams? Choose one small step you can take today, even if it's not perfect. Because growth doesn't come from waiting for perfection. Growth comes from action, from mistakes, and from courage. Thank you for being here with me on Daily English Voices. Remember, progress, not perfection, is the true path to success.